As soon as I mustered out of the Army, I did go to China in '46. And I started my career with the United Nations Rehabilitation Service, running trucks with relief supplies for these villages in central China that had been devastated during the war. What Chiang Kai-shek did during World War II was to blow the dikes of the Yellow River and flood this area completely to try and stop the Japanese, forcing out about 1.5 million people. And these people were then coming back after the war ended and reclaiming their land, which is pretty well parched from the river.
This was during the Civil War. I mean, so they had the nationalist villages and you had communist-controlled territories. So your job was to distribute supplies to both sides, right?
There was a formula that had been arranged. 30% of the relief supplies were to go to the communists, 70% to the nationalists. And Fiorello LaGuardia, the former mayor of New York, was in charge of this whole operation back in Washington. But we had our trucks painted with yellow and black tiger stripes, so presumably they wouldn't get shot at. But often these convoys got held up in the middle of a firefight between the communists and the nationalists, and they didn't care much whether we delivered our supplies or we didn't. They would usually commandeer them and help themselves. So it was finally after getting shot through the windshield that we both, Claude and I, decided the hell with that. And he wanted to get married. He wanted to marry a Russian girl in Shanghai, and I was going to be best man. So we packed up and we took a train down to Hankow, what was then called Hankow, now Wuhan, and took a boat, a Yangtze River boat, 2 days down to Shanghai. But I did resign my job with UNRWA, and I was really feeling pretty blue. I had just gotten a rejection letter from the Columbia School of Journalism.
That's amazing.
That even though I had sold Life some pictures and National Geographic some pictures, and it had written a couple of stories that had been, one had been bought by The Nation, the other one I forget what. Anyway, so I went into the Palace Bar, and I was feeling no job, just coming on Christmas. It was early December, and I was standing there having a drink, and this gentleman offered me a drink, said, can I buy you a drink? And we got chatting, and it turned out that I had a double 2-page spread in Life, that issue of 5,000 skulls on a hillside in central China where I'd been working. The survivors made what I called in my article a stadium of skulls. These all on a hillside with their empty eye sockets looking out into space as a memorial for the people that had been killed. This gentleman next to me was named Bill Gray. It's the Shanghai Bureau Chief for Time and Life. And he had received this magazine with these skulls and had no idea where the picture came from. And I had no idea that it had been published. I told him that was mine, and he said, well, maybe you ought to write me a little, what he called a situationer about what was going on in central China, since I had just spent a year and a half there. So I did. I went back to the hotel and wrote about a 5,000-word piece about the war in central China and gave it to him. And he said, that's pretty good. So why don't you go back to New York, and I will precede you with a cable, and maybe they'll hire you and send you back here. And I finally got this interview, and the interview was given on one condition, that I would go back immediately to China if they hired me. I never filled out an job application, just talking to people. And they said, okay, you're going back to China. And I went back to China and started working as a team with photographer Jack Burns. And the two of us then covered all of China from the fall of Manchuria down to the fall of Shanghai together as a team.